In the crowded neighborhoods of Medellín, long before fear carried his name across continents, Pablo Escobar was just another boy trying to find his place in a world that offered very little. He wasn't born into power. There were no riches waiting for him, no connections to guide him. His father was a farmer, his mother a schoolteacher. Honest people living a modest life, but modest wasn't enough in a place where survival itself felt like a daily challenge. Poverty wasn't just around him, it was part of him. As a child, Pablo watched the world closely. He saw how money changed everything, how it brought respect, comfort, and control. And he also saw the opposite. He saw what happened to those who had nothing. They were ignored, powerless, invisible. That idea stayed with him longer than anything else. But there was something different about Pablo. While other children accepted their reality, he quietly rejected it. He didn't want to live a life where he had to struggle every day just to survive. He wanted more, and not just a little more, he wanted everything. School didn't excite him much. Rules didn't inspire him. What caught his attention was opportunity. Any opportunity to move ahead, no matter how small or risky it seemed. Even at a young age, he had a sharp mind and a bold attitude. He wasn't afraid to take chances. People around him began to notice his confidence. He spoke like someone who already believed he was destined for something bigger. But no one could have imagined just how far that belief would take him or how dangerous it would become. Because in a city where survival often meant bending the rules, Pablo Escobar wasn't just learning how to survive, he was learning how to win. As Pablo Escobar stepped into his teenage years in Medellín, the line between right and wrong began to blur. Not because he didn't understand it, but because he no longer cared. Life had already taught him one brutal lesson. Honesty didn't guarantee success. And for someone who wanted everything, waiting patiently wasn't an option. It started small, petty schemes, quick ways to make money. Pablo began selling stolen cigarettes, then moved on to reselling items he didn't exactly own. At first, it was about survival, but soon it became something else. Something addictive. The money came fast, faster than anything he had seen before, and with money came something even more powerful, respect. People who once ignored him now paid attention. They listened when he spoke. They followed when he led. That feeling changed him. But Pablo didn't stop there. Small crimes no longer satisfied him. He wanted bigger risks, bigger rewards. Soon, he got involved in more organized activities, stealing cars, running scams, even creating fake diplomas to sell to desperate people looking for a better future. Each step pulled him deeper into the world of crime, and the most dangerous part, he was good at it. Pablo had a natural instinct for opportunity. He knew how to talk, how to convince, how to take control of situations. Where others saw risk, he saw profit. Where others hesitated, he acted. There were moments when he could have stopped, moments where he could have chosen a different path. But every success in crime made it harder to turn back, because now he wasn't just surviving, he was winning. And winning felt too good to give up. The streets of Medellín became his classroom. Every deal, every scam, every escape from trouble taught him something new. He was no longer just a boy with big dreams. He was becoming someone who knew how to turn those dreams into reality, no matter the cost. What started as small, harmless-looking choices were slowly building the mindset of a man who would soon change the criminal world forever. By the early 1970s, Pablo Escobar had already proven one thing. He wasn't afraid of crime. In fact, he had mastered it on the streets of Medellín. But deep inside, he knew something was missing. The money he was making still wasn't enough. He had tasted success, but now he wanted power on a completely different level. Not just respect from a few people, but control, influence, and a lifestyle no one around him could even imagine. And that's when opportunity knocked. Around him, a new business was quietly growing. It was risky, illegal, but unbelievably profitable. Cocaine. At first, it was just whispers. Small groups moving small quantities. But Pablo saw what others didn't. He saw the future. He realized that this wasn't just another criminal activity. This was an empire waiting to be built. While others hesitated because of the danger, Pablo moved forward. He started by working with small dealers, learning the system, understanding the routes, the buyers, the risks. But learning wasn't enough for him. He didn't want to be part of the system. He wanted to control it. So he made a decision, a turning point that would define his life forever. He stepped fully into the drug trade. At first, the operations were small, transporting limited amounts, testing the waters. But Pablo was never meant to stay small. He began building connections, organizing networks, and creating a system that was faster, smarter, and more efficient than anything seen before. And most importantly, he removed fear from his decisions. Where others worried about the law, Pablo calculated the risk. Where others saw danger, he saw domination. The money exploded. What he once earned in months, he now made in days, then in hours. It was no longer about survival or even ambition. It was about becoming unstoppable. But with every step deeper into this world, the stakes grew higher. There was no easy way out anymore, no turning back, because this wasn't just crime anymore. This was war against the system, against rivals, and eventually, against an entire country. And Pablo Escobar had just chosen his side. Once Pablo Escobar fully stepped into the drug trade, everything began to move fast, faster than anyone could have imagined. What started as small operations quickly turned into something massive, something unstoppable. This wasn't luck. This was strategy. Pablo understood one simple rule: control the system, and you control everything. So instead of relying on others, he began building his own network from the ground up. Every route, every deal, every person involved was carefully chosen, and soon that network became known as the Medellín Cartel. It wasn't just a group of criminals. It was an empire. Planes were used to transport cocaine across borders. Secret routes were created to avoid authorities. Entire operations were designed with precision. Pablo didn't just want to move drugs. He wanted to dominate the global market. And for a time, he did. Money started pouring in at an unbelievable rate. Millions turned into billions. It is said that at the height of his power, he was one of the richest men in the world. But for Pablo, money was never the end goal. It was a tool, a way to buy loyalty, silence, and control. He helped the poor, built houses, funded local projects. To many people in Medellín, he wasn't just a criminal. He was a hero, someone who gave them hope when no one else did. But behind that image was a different reality. Pablo ruled with fear. His famous approach was simple: plata o plomo, silver or lead. Take the money or face the consequences. There was no middle ground. Judges, police officers, politicians, anyone who stood in his way had to make a choice. And most people chose to stay quiet, because the cost of saying no was too high. As the empire grew, so did his power. He wasn't just influencing the streets anymore. He was influencing the system itself. Corruption spread, fear spread, and slowly, control slipped out of the hands of the government. For a moment, it felt like nothing could stop him. But power like this comes with a price. The bigger the empire became, the more enemies it created. Rivals wanted his position. Governments wanted him gone. And the world was starting to realize the scale of what he had built. Still, Pablo Escobar believed he was untouchable. Because in his mind, he hadn't just built a business, he had built a kingdom. To understand why Pablo Escobar continued down this path, you have to look beyond money and into his mind. This wasn't just about crime, it was about control. Growing up in Medellín, Pablo experienced a world where power was everything. People who had it were respected. People who didn't were ignored. That reality shaped his thinking in a deep and permanent way. So, when he began making money through crime, it wasn't just about wealth. It was about finally being seen, finally being respected, finally being powerful. But there was something even deeper driving him: fear. Not fear of being caught, not fear of losing money, but fear of going back to being nobody. That feeling of being powerless again, of being invisible, of being weak. And that fear made him aggressive. Instead of stepping back when things got risky, he pushed forward. Instead of slowing down, he expanded faster. Because in his mind, the only way to stay safe was to stay on top. Power became addictive. Every time he gained more control, it reinforced his belief that he was unstoppable. The respect he received, the fear he created, the loyalty he bought, all of it fed his ego. And slowly, that ego grew into something dangerous. He no longer saw himself as just a man making choices. He saw himself as someone above the rules, someone who could bend reality to his will. But the truth was different. His decisions weren't just shaping his future, they were sealing it. The deeper he went into the world of power and crime, the harder it became to escape it. Every action created consequences. Every choice built pressure. And every success pushed him further into a corner he couldn't easily walk out of. Still, he kept going. Because for Pablo Escobar, power wasn't just something he had. It was something he needed. As the power of Pablo Escobar grew, so did the consequences of his actions. What once felt like control slowly turned into chaos. The same system he built to protect himself began to attract enemies from every direction. Rival cartels wanted his position. Law enforcement wanted his capture. And governments around the world began to unite against him. Because by now, Pablo wasn't just a criminal. He was a global problem. In Medellín, life became dangerous. Violence spread quickly. Bombings, assassinations, and attacks became part of daily life. Fear wasn't just something people felt. It was something they lived with every single day. And the worst part, it was all tied back to his decisions. Every move he made to gain power came with a cost. People lost their lives. Families were destroyed. Entire communities were affected. What he built was not just an empire. It was a war zone. The government responded with force. Special units were created to hunt him down. International pressure increased. His enemies became more organized, more determined, and more relentless. The man who once controlled everything was now being hunted, and slowly, the cracks in his empire began to show. Trust became harder to maintain. Allies turned into enemies. The same fear he used to control others began to work against him. Because when power is built on fear, it rarely lasts forever. No matter how powerful he seemed, the reality was simple. No empire can survive without consequences. And Pablo Escobar had created too many of them. The world was closing in, and for the first time in his life, he was no longer in complete control. Words. The story of Pablo Escobar leaves us with a powerful question. Was he shaped by his environment or by his own choices? He grew up in the streets of Medellín, surrounded by poverty and limited opportunities. But many people face the same conditions and never choose the path he did. In the end, Escobar's journey reminds us that every decision matters. Small choices can lead to big consequences, and sometimes the difference between success and destruction is just one decision.